Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into our latest historic weather video. We're going back to the 60s again with this historic video. We're looking at the years of 1966 and 1967. This is part 3 of the Back to the 60s series. So sit back, relax and enjoy. And I shall talk you through our latest historic weather vid in a moment. And thank you so much for spending this time with me and with GavsWeatherVids on this bank holiday Monday as well. So you always sound blown away that people want to spend this time, you know, with me and with GavsWeatherVids on their precious bank holiday. So thank you so much everybody for tuning in. And hope you're having a lovely bank holiday Monday as well. Just say first video release today was our 6 AM UK weather forecast, so check that one out if you'd like to do that, and like, share and subscribe on all of the videos and content. Thank you so much everybody. Thank you so much to Trevor Harley and also to the historic archive of charts at Weather as well, by the way. Thank you so much to Trevor and also to Weather for the historical data. That's unbelievable, it's amazing. Thank you so much to those two resources. As you always say, I'm just cogging in the wheel really with these historic weather videos. What makes them work is the archive of charts combined with the information from Trevor Hardy, you know, and I'm just like the narrator of the story. So they're the two resources really that bring the historic vids together. Thank you so much to Weather, and thank you so much to Trevor Hardy too. And thank you so to Rich for our historic weather video gift for the Back to the 60s series. Thank you so much, Rich. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much, my friend. Okay, well, all of the thank yous have been handed out, and I think we're ready now to resume the Back to the 60s series, and where we left off is where we're going to pick up. So we left off part 2, episode 2, on the last day of May 1966. We're going to pick things up on the first day of June. First day of June and first day of meteorological summer as well. So this month is a very warm month actually for 1960s June. Has a central temperature of 15.4. Trevor Hardy says it's warm but wet, and it was particularly wet in the north, and it was very dull in Scotland, where it's the dullest since records began, actually, as well as Northern Ireland. June was the warmest month of the summer, according to the CT, and indeed the warmest of any month from September 1964 to July 1967. Those terrible 60s summers, yeah, they were. Right, okay, so let's see how we begin with high pressure sitting just to the west of the country, looking mainly dry then, and we go through the second and the third. Weakening the ridge, pressure developing in the Atlantic side, looking a little bit ominous. So here we go for fifth. The pressure starting to head in from off the Atlantic. Remember, 1966 is a very, very wet year. We've already established in part 2, episode 2, that the early part of the year was really quite wet. It's carrying on into the summer as well. Now, we're trying to get a ridge going here, though, on the 7th of June. Looking quite promising. And winter coming up from a southerly direction, so that explains why the CT is quite warm, I suppose. Often bring up southerly winds, but this looks thundery. Look at this, we've got a thundery low pushing northwards. Temporary temperatures aren't excessively warm, but I suppose for a 1960s summer there, pretty warm and humid. Bass per temp, low pressure is sinking back down towards Biscay, pulling in this east to southeasterly wind. Actually 11th through the 12th, though we've got some low pressure again. You can start heading in from the Atlantic. So she's quite a southerly sort of month. High pressure up towards Scandinavia, low pressure up the Atlantic. It wouldn't look out of place in a modern June, actually. This, you know, with regular sort of southerly influences and high pressure away to the east and to the northeast. Well, that's the 15th, with low pressure out to the west of the UK and Ireland. High pressure is originating to the northeast. Well, that's the 16th again. High pressure up to the northeast. Low pressure is out to the west. We're drawing up that southerly flow. Upper temps actually very warm for this era in June. You know, I don't see many June days in the 1960s where you're pulling up plus 10 and very nearly plus 15 Celsius isotherms. No, this is one of the warmest Junes of the 1960s, I think. Low pressure increasingly deepening, though, as we move through 17th, 18th. So after about warm, well, probably very warm, and rather wet, showery, maybe thundery first half, now we're going into more of an Atlantic-driven pattern, starting to drive in the areas of low pressure. They'll be bringing outbreaks of rain and also cooler temperatures in Whitby. Look at the upper air temperatures. They have lowered back down, I think, quite a lot cooler compared to the earlier upper air temperatures that we saw. And the low pressures may just keep on coming up, particularly affecting the north through the third week of the month, while high pressure starts building up to the south. That turns things a little bit drier into southern areas, but it looks a very changeable pattern. It's a very mobile pattern from the second half of June 1966. That gets us to the final day of the month, where we've got high pressure sitting just to our southwest, ridging in from the Azores, bring quite a dry weather with it. So probably a reasonably dry and relatively warmish end to what was a warm but also pretty wet month. Upper air temperatures actually look probably close to average. Okay, we head on into July, and July of 1966 has a central temperature of 15 degrees, 15.0. The highest temperature of the month was just 29 Celsius at Perth on the 21st. As cold east is circulating around low pressure affecting much of southeastern England. Well, we'll have a look at that in a moment. That'd be a strange pattern, wouldn't it? The cold northeast is in the southeast and 29 Celsius in Perth. That CT, by the way, 15.0 is cooler than the June preceding it, which is quite unusual for July to be cooler than the June before it, but of course it does happen sometimes. For example, it happened last summer in 2023, actually. Anyway, we begin July 1966 with a little bit of a ridge of south, low pressure up to the north, and that's bringing in cooler and showery conditions with it. We go through the 2nd, 3rd, 4th of July. A little bit on the showery side there, with lower pressure to the north, high pressure again is away to the southwest. That's the 5th of July, rather cool and showery with those northerly winds, and up to the 6th, 7th, well, high pressure trying to reach up from the southwest, but all looking rather, Atlantic driven, I have to say. Probably reasonably dry down in the south, but in the north, I imagine there will be some spells of rain starting to push through. Now, into the 2nd week of July, perhaps deepening area of low pressure brings something a little bit more unsettled. And again, winds in generally from a northwesterly direction, so as upper air temperatures are looking quite cool here. It's certainly not much to write home about, isn't it? Is it by sort of modern July standards? We all remember that phenomenal July of 2022, of course. Well, that's the 15th, and we're under a trough of low, so more showers and long spells of rain, likely pretty cool temperatures with that as well. And then we head on into the second half of the month. We've got quite a nice ridge beginning to build here. So higher pressure starting to ridge up from the Azores up to northern parts of Europe by the 18th of July. But low pressure beginning to develop over the continent. So quite an unusual pattern. As Trevor Hardy says, just a couple of days after, it's going to get to 29 degrees at Perth, but they'll be cold easterlies down in the southeast. And we see how this is happening. Look at the upper air temperature, actually quite warm, but I imagine this low is going to deepen over the continent. That's the 20th, that's the 21st. Oh, right, well, not particularly. I thought that low would become a major feature. I don't look at these charts, by the way. A lot of people think I look at the chart before I do the video. I don't. I discover these charts with all of you. I like doing it that way, so I'm always somewhat surprised, sometimes anyway, if I don't know what's coming. Well, that's the 21st of July, so this is when we're reaching 29 degrees in Perth. Upper air temperatures look pretty warm across the board, don't they? But there's like the northeast, it's probably dragging in a lot of cloud into the southeastern corner, I would have thought. Well, anyway, we pull the high pressure out into the Atlantic, and we deepen low pressure in the Norwegian Sea as we go to the 23rd and the 24th. That starts to bring down like a proper northerly push then. So as we come in towards the final week of July, it turns significantly cooler and more unsettled. These areas of low pressure bring spells of rain in with. We're coming up towards month's end now. Low pressure still in control of the pattern. That's the 29th of July, still under low pressure So plenty of rain with that. Now, this is the 30th of July, which I believe is the day that we won the World Cup. Is that right? Is it the 30th of July? When we have the World Cup final, and England, I say we, there'll be people watching from Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland saying no, that's nothing to do with us. So I better caveat that and say by we, I'm talking about England winning the World Cup. I think it was the 30th of July, not Sunday the 31st. But both days actually, whichever day it was, I think it was the 30th, but it might have been the 31st. But anyway, whichever day it was, looks pretty unsettled. But I know it was quite a nice day, from the footage, the famous footage of that final, the sun shining over Wembley as England beat Germany and lifted the World Cup for the one and only time in the history of England doing that. So whichever day it was, it looks like it's an unsettled day, but I know that down in Wembley anyway, there was a lot of dry and warm weather in an otherwise pretty, dry and sunny weather. Probably wasn't that warm. But I know whichever day it was, that's how it was down in Wembley. So if anyone's got any memories of that, please fire away in the comments. Now, we go through to August, the last month of the summer. And we got a century temperature of 14.7. So we're even lower now, even further away from June's 15.4. Quite unusual again for July and August to come in underneath June. And Trevor Hardy writes, and this was the wettest August bank holiday on record up to that point. Has 50 millimetres of rain in Winchester and 105 millimetres of rain at Wroxall, I think that is, in Warwickshire. Although the preceding Saturday and Sunday were warm and sunny. Now, back in this era, I think the bank holiday is the first weekend of August rather than the last weekend of August. I don't think we'd have the change to make it the last weekend of August up to this point, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But maybe not, because this would be Monday the 1st, wouldn't it? Bank holiday Monday, Thursday. So I'm not sure when the bank holiday was, but anyway, whenever it was very wet. Low pressures coming in from off the Atlantic here through the opening days of August 1966, bringing plenty of wet weather in with it. We go beyond that, and we find further low pressures driving in from the Atlantic as well. It's a very unsettled start to August, I have to say this, and no surprise, it has a really low CT. 14.7 is pretty abysmal, for an August CT. That's the 9th, looking particularly wet, windy, and autumnal, with low pressure sweeping through the country. And we get through the 10th and the 11th, further lows in the mix. Now, we are trying to build up some hotter air to the south, though. There's a bit of a heat getting going over the continent. This will be the hottest part of the summer, I would imagine. And much of the continent, very intense heat through Spain and Portugal, even back in the 1960s. You see how the heat is there across North Africa and into Spain and Portugal. So even back then, the heat could be ferocious down across the south. And plus 20 Celsius ice is actually well north into France. But I don't think you'll get any further north, because I think the heat there will combine with this trough and develop a major low. Let's see. Well, not really. So again, we've got a trough out to the northwest. You've got the heat trying to push up from the south, courtesy of this ridge. Look how intense the heat is across France, Spain, Portugal. Goodness gracious me. That was in the modern era. We will definitely bring that heat up, of course. But let's see what happens. Well, there we go. So there's the low I was expecting. So it did actually generate an area of low in the end. So quite an interesting pattern, that. We've got this shallow sort of low here on the 11th. It sort of develops just into like a trough on the 12th. But a big temperature contrast, cool to the north of Scotland, very hot across Spain and Portugal. And the upshot is just to develop quite a significant area of low pressure right over top of the country. Look at those upper air temperatures. They're looking hot from North Africa, Spain, Portugal, through France into Germany, and a lot cooler around the northern and western side of that area of low pressure. I reckon that low will probably have brought some very heavy, thundery rain, maybe thunderstorm, but I would imagine, particularly some very, very wet conditions with such a big temperature contrast. So a really wet spell as we go to the middle part of August. Then that low gets up towards Scandinavia we build a ridge out to west, and we start turning more settled and a little bit warmer as well. Upper air temperatures are lifting up, but nothing to get especially excited about. But this second half of August looking a little bit drier and warmer until we get towards the last week, 10 days. Then the high pressure starts drifting away towards Greenland and Iceland. We start to bring in more of a north or a northeasterly with showery conditions in the east and high pressure out towards the west. We start to set up an area of high pressure then as we go into the last week of August. We've got a Scandinavian high beginning to get going. Something we do see quite regularly actually at the end of August into the beginning of September, and we start to bring the wind in from more of an easterly direction, but low pressure still trying to head in from off the Atlantic. Look at this, we're developing a major low again as we get towards the end of this very cool and wet August. That's the final day of August and the final day of meteorological summer, where a bit of a hint of northern blocking around Greenland, Iceland, and lower pressure starting to come in from off the Atlantic, taking us very nicely through to September. Now, we don't have much information for September, but it's a very average month with a central temperature of 13.8. That's all we've got. So it's starting off on an unsettled note with low pressure in from the Atlantic, plenty of cloud, wind and rain, and that's an interesting feature just there on the 3rd. That's the remnants of some sort of tropical storm and or hurricane moving into the North Atlantic. Let's see what that does for the pattern. Well, it brings some warmer air up into the south. The upper air temperatures show that we bring up plus 10 Celsius iceberg, plus 15 Celsius iceberg down to southwest. But it is also bringing wet and windy weather into the north and the west as well. That's the 5th of September. 6th of September, 7th of September, a little bit of a ridge trying to build in the wake of that ex-hurricane. Upper air temperatures are becoming cooler up in the north, but it is turning dry as well. Will we get a big high pressure like we normally do in September? Doesn't look like it. So into the second week now with higher pressure to the south and low pressure again is away to the northwest. That's the 11th to the 12th, turning wet and windy across the whole country, looking pretty autumnal. This does look like quite an unsettled first half to September, I have to say, particularly so for the north. We're up to the middle of September now with a ridge out to our west and winds coming in relatively cool northwesterly direction. Higher pressure much more involved into the second half of the month. The upper air temperatures probably about average, would be quite cool at night, I would imagine. But high pressure sticks around, so into the second half of September, actually looking drier and probably a little bit warmer than it was in the first half of the month, if anything. So we do eventually get one of those big anticyclones setting up that September is famous for, but it happens a little bit later on in the month compared to where we normally sit, which would normally be like the first week or 10 days or so, first couple of weeks of September. We're into the final days of the month. High pressure beginning to drift northwards, lower pressure developing both south and also to the west as well. The ridge is gradually being eroded, nibbled out and broken down. That's the last day of September. We're turning rather wet and windy then. And then that takes us into October, and October is a very unsettled month. It has 265 millimetres of rain throughout the month in Ramsgate. There's a tornado which caused widespread serious damage at Headington on the 16th. We'll get back in Oxfordshire, by the way. We get to that in a moment. And then on a much sadder note, and we will cover this in a little bit more detail later on, prolonged heavy rain in South Wales contributed to the Aberfan disaster on the 21st, and we'll actually have a look at the Wikipedia page and discuss that a little bit when we get to it. But we're starting the 1st of October 1966 with low pressure in the Atlantic, bringing loads of cloud, wind and rain. So look at this, it's a very autumnal pattern here from the 2nd to the 3rd. Upper air temperatures actually trying to pull down some cold air from the north, but got warm air across much of the continent, again fueling that area of low pressure. So the pattern that we saw in August, with the low being fueled by the temperature contrast, it's still ongoing into October, saying that this is kind of like an unsettled pattern, very much a temperature contrast fueling areas of low pressure and whatnot. 6th of October, further low pressure driving in from off the Atlantic as well. A little bit of a break in the lows as we get through to the 8th of the night, but then further low pressures coming in around the 10th and the 11th, looking properly wet and windy again out to the west from the 12th through to the 13th, throwing up rain bands from the south and the west. Pretty mild with the temperature, the air is coming up from a southerly southwesterly direction, so temperatures would be okay, but it does look really unsettled bits with this deep area of low pressure bringing heavy and also persistent rain in with it. We're moving to the middle part of October, and the unsettled pattern continues. Look at the continuous areas of low pressure, conveyor belts of low pressure, bringing lots of unsettled bouts of rain in with them. That's the 16th of October, and busy per day, but we have that tornado at Headington in northwestern Oxfordshire, causing widespread and serious damage. Goodness gracious me. The low pressure just remains anchored and rooted to our southwest. That's the 17th of October 1966, 11 years before Gav entered the world. I don't know. 18th of October keeps that low pressure dartboard low right over the top of the country. 19th again, the low pressure is very much there, and then go through to the 20th, Thursday the 20th, and then on to Friday the 21st, and we're still dominated by areas of low pressure. And this gets us to the day of the Aberfan disaster. We have got to cover this, so it's a very sad event. I would rather not do, but it is one of the significant weather events that have occurred in history where one of the more significant, I shouldn't say weather event, because it's not entirely a weather event, there's a lot of human negligence with this as well, but it is one of the serious events in the 20th century, but where the weather at least played a contributory factor in what happened. So let's very quickly pull up the Wikipedia page here and have a little bit of a discussion about the Aberfan disaster. So, the Aberfan disaster was a catastrophic collapse of a colliery-spoiled tip on the 21st of October 1966. The tip had been created on a mountain slope above the Welsh village of Aberfan, near Merthyr Tydfil, and overlaid a natural spring. So why you would have, a coal tip over a natural spring, I don't know. On the top of the mountain, above a village, it seems to be asking for trouble, doesn't it? Just the very idea of it, but that's what they did. Anyway, heavy rain led to a build-up of water within the tip that caused it to suddenly slide downhill as a slurry. This event killed 116 children and 28 adults as it engulfed the Paint Glass Junior School and a row of houses. The tip was the responsibility of the National Coal Board, and the subsequent inquiry placed the blame for disaster on the organisation and 9 named employees. So although the weather with this did play a very significant contributory factor, there was a great deal of human negligence that led to this disaster as well. I'll just give you a little bit more information about that. So go here. So, during the first 3 weeks of October 1966, there were 6.5 inches of rain, 170 millimetres, nearly half of which was in the third week. So, from the 15th to 22nd, half of that 170 millimetres in the first 3 weeks occurred just in that 1 week. During the night of the 20th to 21st of October, the peak of the tip subsided by 9 to 10 feet, and the rails on which the spoils were transported on the top of the tip fell into the resulting hole. The spoil movement was discovered at 7:30 a.m. by the first members of the morning shift manning the heaps. One of the workers walked to the colliery to report the slip. He returned with the supervisor to the tips, and it was decided that no further work would be done that day, but that a new tipping position would be decided on the following week. At 9:15 a.m., a significant amount of water-saturated debris broke away from tip 7 and flowed downhill at 11 to 21 miles per hour in waves 20 to 30 feet high. Imagine that coming at you. Unbelievably, frightening and scary it must have been. GMJ Williams, a consultant engineer who gave evidence at the subsequent tribunal, stated that the 9:15 a.m. movement took part of the saturated material past the point where a liquefaction occurred. This initially liquefied material began to move rapidly, releasing energy which liquefied the rest of the saturated portion of the tip. And almost instantaneously, the nature of the saturated lower parts of tip number 7 was changed from that of a solid to that of a heavy liquid of a density of approximately twice that of water. This was the dark, glistening wave which several witnesses saw burst from the bottom of the tip. And so it goes on. Approximately 140,000 cubic yards of spoils slid 700 yards, 640 metres down the mountain, destroying 2 farm cottages and killing the occupants. Around 50,000 cubic yards travelled across the canal, a railway embankment, and into the village. The flow destroyed 2 water mains buried in the embankment, and the additional water further saturated the spoils. Those who heard the avalanche said the sound reminded them of low-flying jet or thunder. The avalanche struck Paintglass Junior School on Moy Road, demolishing and engulfing much of the structure and filling the classrooms with thick mud, sludge and rubble. 109 children from the 240 attendees and 5 teachers were killed at the school. The pupils of the Paintglass Junior School had arrived only minutes earlier for the last day before half-term holiday, which was due to start at 12 midday. The teachers had begun to record the children's attendance in the register when the landslide hit. The adjacent secondary school was also damaged, and 18 houses on the surrounding roads were destroyed. Mud and water from the slide flooded other houses in the vicinity, forcing many to evacuate their homes. Once the slide material had come to a halt, it re-solidified. A huge mound of slurry up to 30 feet, 9.1 metres high, blocked the area. The acting headmaster of the secondary school recalled the girls' entrance of the secondary school was approximately 2/3 to 3/4 full of rubble and waste material. I climbed onto the rubble in the doorway and I looked directly in front of me. I saw that the houses in Moy Road had vanished in the mass of tip waste material, and that the junior school gable ends or part of the roof was sticking out of the morass. I looked down to the right and saw that the Moy Road houses were gone. Some of the staff died trying to protect the children. Nancy Williams, the school meals clerk, used her body to shield 5 children who all survived. Williams did not, and was found by rescuers still holding a pound note she had been collecting as lunch money. Di Benyon, the deputy headmaster, tried to use a blackboard to shield himself and 5 children from the slurry pouring through the school. He and 34 pupils in the class were killed. When the avalanche stopped, so did the noise. One resident recalled that in the silence you couldn't hear a bird or a child. Goodness gracious me, and so it goes on to discuss the rescue efforts and the retrieval of bodies, which we won't go into. So I think, that's enough to get a pretty good idea of just what a devastating, terrible and frightening disaster this was. I will link to this Wikipedia page in the description, so if anybody would like to know more about the Aberfan disaster, then, you can have a look at that at your will, and say the link is in the description with this video. So again, it goes to show that the weather can sometimes be truly devastating. We don't get a huge amount of weather. We're very lucky this country. We don't get a huge amount of weather that takes lives and is such a devastating event. But occasionally, it does happen here. We have the 87 storm, for example, that took lives as well. So sometimes we get a particularly severe weather event. As I say, this isn't purely down to weather. There is the element of human negligence in there as well. But definitely, like the persistent rain over that initial period, in what had already been a very wet year anyway, certainly that did create a very, very significant contributory factor. Right, let's carry on then, and we move on to the final sort of week or so of October. We're building up a Greenland high here around Iceland and bringing the wind from a colder northerly direction. So now we're beginning to go colder as we get to the final sort of week of October. By the way, I'm not sure I mentioned it, but October of 1966 had a central temperature of 10.1, which is actually about average, really. But the main point of the month, of course, was how exceptionally wet it was. That's how the upper air temperatures look on the 24. So definitely things are turning cooler here. Not necessarily all that cold, but definitely a much more cooler feel to things. High pressure out to the northwest, low pressure to the east is probably allowing things to dry out a little bit. It's still an unsettled, showery pattern, but I would imagine with the Atlantic blocked off, we are losing the persistent, very heavy rain, and I would assume that this helped, the clean-up process from that disaster. We're coming to the last days of October 1966. High pressure is still out to our west, bring down a little bit more of a northerly flow there for Halloween. Right, let's move on to November. November 1966 is a generally cold month, although it was briefly warm in the southeast around the 17th, when 17 degrees is achieved. Around the 17th, there was a miniature storm corresponding to a peak in the Leonids, I think that is, cycle. Somebody will pick me up on that, won't you, Steffi? How I pronounce that? Right, anyway, this is how things look on the first day of November 66. High pressure's out to the northwest, low pressure over France, and winds are coming in from that cold northeasterly direction. The upper air temperature may look actually quite impressively cold, really. So I would imagine there will be some snow showers, or certainly wintry showers coming in with those northeasterly winds. Low pressure drops in from the north. That brings a very wet spell through the 3rd to the 4th of November, with that area of the low just there. The low pressure sinking south was allowing the wind to turn back in to the north and from the northeast. So really quite unsettled, but also quite cold sort of opening week to November. This November has a CET of 5.6, by the way, so that is quite chilly. Especially by modern standards. We don't get many Novembers these days that have 5 Celsius CETs. Into the second week of the month, well, ridge of high pressure beginning to push in from the southwest, brings something a little bit drier and quieter. And now we're turning milder as we're moving toward the middle part of November. High pressure to the south, low pressure to the north. Winds again coming in from that westerly direction. Heading into the middle part of the month again, we're looking rather unsettled here, with further wind and rain sweeping through on those strong northwesterly winds. A northerly blast there around the 16th, again bring down the -5 Celsius iceberg. Showers turning wintry, especially in the north, turning northeasterly with the wind there on the 17th, and of course that's the day of the miniature storm. Looking pretty chilly there, with further showers, some of them will be wintry in the north. High pressure heading up towards Scandinavia then, as we go through to the 19th and the 20th. Looking rather chilly, or maybe a little bit early. The upper air temperatures are quite cold, but if it had happened a month further on, no doubt it would have been a significantly colder month than It's probably with a 3 Celsius CET, who knows. Into the final week of November 1966, winds are backing round into the west again, with high pressure to West Spain, Portugal, low pressure to the north of Scotland, and that's been further northwesterly or northerly influences. The last day of the month looking really quite unsettled, a deep low in the North Sea, plenty of wintry showers coming in with that northwesterly wind as well, and a rather stormy look actually, maybe some gale force winds pushing down the North Sea. We'll pause the video there, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the winter of 1966-1967. Were all the 1960s winters cold? You'll find out in a moment. Okay then, let's resume this look at 1966 to 1967. So, before I pause the video, I gave a question, were all of the 1960s winters cold? Because the 1960s, of course, is associated with not only really miserable wet summers, often cool summers too, but is also associated with cold winters, particularly so that year of cold winters, 62, 63. Not every single winter in the 1960s was cold though, and 66, 67 is an example of winter that wasn't particularly cold. It has a December CT of 5.5, a January CT of 4.5, and a February CT of 5.4. So overall, pretty mild, and would be, that wouldn't be out of place in a modern winter. Really. So we'll rattle through these charts quite quickly. Looking very stormy here for the first day of December 1966. And then into a rather colder sort of northwesterly push there as we go through second into the third. Back into westerly winds though. We have quite an intense polar vortex as we go through the 5th of December. And further low pressures dominating the weather there as we go through to the 8th of the night. Quite a stormy and unsettled and relatively cool-ish start to December 66 and mid-tropical winter 66, 67. Further low pressures are pushing through here around the middle part of the month. Again, trying to bring some colder air in from the northeast, courtesy that Scandinavian high, but I don't think that's going to be able to get a foothold. It's having a really good go. Many of the 1960s winters do have those big Scandinavian highs and very cold easterly winds. We're just about on the periphery of that cold air, but it's going to be going into retreat, I think, by the 15th, as this low brings wet and windy weather in, and a big slice of milder than average upper temperatures as well. Back into very mild southwesterlies there by the 17th, as we're approaching Christmas. All looking pretty mild with rain in the north, probably reasonably dry though down in the south. We're heading up towards Christmas, and we're looking a little bit cooler for the north, maybe some wintry showers in northern Scotland, otherwise not that cold. That's Christmas Eve, and that's Christmas Day. Now, Christmas Eve looks quite cold, actually, winds in from the northwesterly. I've got -10 Celsius ice just into the north of Scotland, and then a ridge building through that. So probably got a chilly Christmas. Trevor Hardy actually says that it was a cold but sunny Christmas Day. And he also said that the record daily rainfall for the month was 199.1 millimetres, which was set in the Highlands on the 17th. Good gracious me. The month started with an intense depression on the 1st, which we looked at a moment ago, had a central pressure of 944 millibars at Marl of Galloway. Good gracious. What an intense low that was. Well, we're into the last week of December. Still looking rather Atlantic-driven, relatively mild, wet and windy. That gets us to the new year. Now, we're trying to get some colder air going for the new year. -5 Celsius icebergs are pushed southwards there, courtesy of this little blocking feature around Iceland. I don't think that's going to last too long. But as we go through to the 2nd and into the 3rd, we have quite a bit of a cold snap going here, actually. So we're within the -5 Celsius iceberg, -10 Celsius iceberg, just into the north of Scotland. That brings some snow showers to northern and eastern areas, and probably quite significant night frost. But I think it's going to break down relatively quick, because we have a CT but 4.5, which isn't that cold. However, we go further on, and we do still have high pressure way to the northwest, so we're definitely trying to bring in some really quite cold air from the east. Actually, quite surprised about this. 7th of January, got +10 Celsius iceberg there, flirting with the East Anglian coast. Let's see what Trevor Hardy has to say. So slightly mild than average overall, although the first half was cold and dry, with a notable snowfall in parts of the southeast on the 6th and the 7th. No doubt, courtesy of that -10 Celsius iceberg just there, combined with this low around Biscay. There's going to be a mild second half of the month that more than made up for it. So, yeah, let's go down at 6, shall we? Got a bit of a blocking feature. If we look at the upper air temperatures, got -10 Celsius iceberg over on the continent. By the 7th, this low has burnt around Biscay, bringing in that cold air from the east, and that's where the snowfall comes from in the southeast corner. So even in this, probably just about one of the mildest winters of 1960s, there is still some snow and cold weather involved. That's the 8th of January. Again, we've got the -10 Celsius iceberg there right way through England away. I was quite surprised about that, but we had such a potent cold snap. But by the 9th to the 10th, the high pressure began to pull out to the westwards, allowing milder or less cold northwesterly air streams to start coming back down from the north. And then that takes us on into the middle part of the month. We're looking a lot milder now under this area of high pressure. But could be some dense fog, of course, an inversion going on and about high pressure, but you certainly bring milder air around the top anyway, with those southwesterly winds. High pressure breaking down, second half of January, low pressure bringing wet and windy air sweeping in from off the Atlantic. Those areas of low pressure keep on coming then into the second half of the month, looking very southwesterly, and I say wouldn't be out of place in a modern January. Going through to February, not much to say other than quite mild. Central temperature is 5.4. I imagine most of the month is dominated by high pressure south, low pressure away to the north in February 1967. So sorry everybody, and that's very much the way of it. So high pressure actually brings probably quite a bit of dry weather. We're certainly breaking out of the deluge pattern that we have throughout most of 1966. High pressure building away to the east there by the 12th. Upper air temperatures aren't that cold though. More of a southeasterly type flow. Heading into the middle part of the month, well, low pressure coming back in from the Atlantic. Again, upper air temps looking relatively mild with that, and those areas of low pressure will bring further bounce rain. So after a drier first half of February, second half of the month turns distinctly Atlantic driven, wet and windy, just again proving that not all the winters of the 1960s were cold. Not all of them, had brutal cold and lots of snow. There were a couple that were a lot milder, and 66, 67 is one of those examples. That gets us to the end of February 1967, where we're looking particularly wet and windy there with winds in from the northwest. We move through to spring 1967, and March has a central temperature of CT, an unsettled month with mainly westerly winds. It was the wettest of the century in Scotland. It was very stormy at times in the north and west. A gust of 144 miles per hour was recorded at Cairngorm on the 6th. So the second's trying to build up a ridge from the Azores, but I imagine that's very quickly going to get flattened off by low pressure deepening in the Atlantic. This is the 6th, so that's the day we get that tremendous wind gust at Cairngorm. And further areas of low pressure keep on coming throughout March, second week of March 1967. Bouts of rain sweeping through, always high pressure to the south but to the southwest, low pressure away to the northwest, very Atlantic driven. Probably not overly wet, I wouldn't have thought, down in the south, always close to that ridge, but certainly looks a very unsettled month up in the north into the closing days of March 1967. Again, very cyclonic, lots of rain coming through. Then we go through to April, has a central temperature of 7.7, which is slightly cooler than average. Further low pressures still bringing more bouts of rain, winds again in from that northwesterly direction before we start ridging high pressure up to the north. So we get wind into the east here as we go further on through the first week of April. No particularly cold upper air temperatures, but probably a chillier feel anyway. Of course, we always get easts as we break down the polar vortex in April. At some point, we can expect a spell of easterly winds, and this all looks rather classic. High pressure then ridging through the country around the middle part of the month, bringing quite a lot of dry weather, and then the high pressure, sticking around, bring again, quite a bit of dry weather, quite cool nights, I would imagine, with that. Into the last week to 10 days, well, looks like trying to go more unsettled again, with further bouts of rain sweeping through, and that's how we end April of 1967, with high pressure out to west, getting ready to pull down the wind from the north. And then we go through to May of 1967, which is the wettest of the century for England and Wales, with an average of 141 millimetres. So saying that the 1967 breaks out of the deluge pattern from 1966 is not necessarily strictly true. It was also one of the most thundery months on record this May. Thunder was heard on 16 days in West Raynham in Norfolk. The bank holiday was the May bank holiday. I think it means the late May bank holiday. Back then known as Whitsun, was very wet. Let's see what happens there. Well, we've got high pressure out to the west, a deepening area of low pressure, bringing lots of wind and rain in from the Atlantic here through the first week of the month. So we can see why it was such a wet May indeed, with low pressure never far away. Another low pushing up from the south this time into the second week of the month. That looks like it will bring a bit of a deluge to more southern areas as well. Bouts of heavy rain coming up with that. And so on and on it goes. Low pressure coming in, bringing further wet weather there from the 18th to the 19th of May too. That looks quite autumnal, doesn't it? 21st, low pressure bringing lots of wind and rain sweeping in from off the Atlantic, and on and on and on it goes. We're into the bank holiday weekend now. With, you've guessed it, low pressure never far away. I think that will be bank holiday Monday, 29th of May. Again, looks pretty unsettled. You know, low pressure's out to west, with probably slow moving, where influencing the flow as well, bringing lots of wind and rain in with it. And that gets us to the first day of June and the first day of meteorological summer, 1967, the summer of love. And at that point, I think we shall end it there. Shall we end it there? Or should we go on and have a look at the summer of 1967? What should we do? 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 Okay, let's have a look at the summer of 1967. Why not? So June is a... webcam. I don't want to see me reading. Let's put the webcam off. Hold on. I bet I've had that on actually through that's a bit of a faux pas through the second part of this. Right, so June has a CT of 14.0. Very close to the long-term average temperature overall. Cool and unsettled start. Then finer dry spell occurs. The final 10 days of cool and unsettled. There are some violent thunderstorms on the 24th and the 25th. 36 millimetres rain fell in 42 millimetres at Aberfan on the 24th. A party of 6 potholers, again, unfortunately, were drowned in a flash flood at the Moss Side caving disaster near Wharfdale, Yorkshire, following torrential rain on the 24th of June. It looks like it's going to be a very unsettled month, and CT 14 isn't much to get excited about either, by the way. Well, it starts off with a ridge of high pressure, being quite a bit of dry weather and reasonably warm down in the south, but I think that the days of that ridge are numbered, and here we go. We're pulling in something rather cooler and more showery there by the 7th. The 8th through to the 9th and the 10th sees high pressure bow re-establishing, so relatively dry first half of June of 1967 actually. Often quite warm as well, but I would imagine this high pressure is going to break down at some point. I'm surprised how anticyclonic this is looking. Upper temperatures aren't especially exciting, but I'm a little bit surprised how anticyclonic that looks. However, by the 19th, then we go about high pressure breaking down, and then we go into a much more unsettled pattern by the 21st, 22nd. Low pressure bringing lots of wet weather. This is 24th when that disaster occurs at the Moss Side caving disaster near Wharfdale in Yorkshire, and it occurs due to that area of low pressure there. That brings lots of heavy rain around the 24th to the 25th. Beyond that, further low pressures driving in from off the Atlantic. Relatively warm in the south to end the month, more unsettled up in the north. July of 1967 and a CT of 16.7, which for a 1960 July is actually quite warm. The second warmest 16.7 month of B60s. So, right through Harley, there was some severe thunder and hailstorms on 13th, particularly around Chippenham area of Wiltshire, where large 57-gram hailstones caused devastation to glass. Goodness gracious me, that's on the 13th. So we start off again looking rather unsettled. We've got a high pressure though bridging into the south. Low pressure is away to the north. Always a bit of an influence from the Azores high, keeping most southern areas drier and warmer, hence a CT of 16.7, which, as I say, is like quite a warm month really for 1960s summer, and is the second warmest of the 1960s. I think only July 1969 would be warmer than that. Into the middle part of the month, well, that's the 13th, that's when that hailstorm occurs, but smashes all the glass. Beyond that, into the middle part of July, we've got high pressure way to the east, low pressure is out to the west. Again, upper air temps looking quite warm there. That looks like a thundery sort of middle part of July, I have to say. And then beyond that, well, we just keep the low pressures coming to the north, so it looks like quite an unsettled and coolish month for the north. Always a little bit drier and warmer from the extension from the Azores high down into the south. We end July of 1967 again with warm air into the south and cooler air away to the northwest. And then lastly, before we wrap this one up, we've got August, which has a central temperature of 15.7, which is relatively coolish August. It's hot in the southeast on the first day of month, where 30 degrees was reached in some places. It then became unsettled until the 19th. There were some severe thunderstorms and flash flooding in the north on the 8th as the depression passed near the southwest. Right, so let's have a look at that. We start off, as I say, really quite hot in the southeast corner, courtesy of the upper air temperatures. I think that hot air, though, is going to get swept away by this area of low pressure coming in from off the Atlantic. And then we're into a relatively cool and unsettled pattern. Brings that low to the west and to the southwest around the 7th through the 8th to the 9th. And that brings lots of heavy rain in with it. As I say, the 8th of August saw 75 millimetres of rain in 3 hours in North Lancashire, with 117 millimetres in 90 minutes at Dunscott Valley. Villages were cut off and there was flooding in Ray, Lancashire, with rivers bursting their banks and bridges collapsing. The village was cut off for 4 hours. Lightning deaths occurred during this spell as well. The storm continued into the night and there were more the next day. On the night, there was 54 millimetres of rain in Huddersfield and 52 millimetres in Ilfracombe. On the 10th, the test match at Trent Bridge was delayed by severe thunderstorms and flooding on the ground. So, yeah, this is quite a significant area of low pressure, isn't it? To say the least, bringing lots of heavy rain and thunder. It's interesting because I always thought that 1967 was a significantly drier year to 1966, but actually it looks like in reality 1967 was also really a very wet year, albeit the summer was warmer than the summer of 1966, but overall 2 really wet years, I think, for 66 and also for 67. Well, we're getting towards the end of August, and now we've got a bit of a pattern change as higher pressure starts taking over. That brings something no doubt a lot drier and also rather warmer as well in with it. How long is that ridge going to last for? Answer, not very long. Or maybe it's going to keep going though into months there. We're up to 27. Quite a nice extension from the Azores up towards Scandinavia there. Are we going to break it down by month's end? Well, that's how we end August 1967. A little bit unsettled up to the north. Still trying to hang on to the ridge down in the south. And that's how the upper air temperatures are looking cool in the north and warmer for the south. And at that point, I think we're going to end it there. So we've been talking for over 50 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed our look at 1966, 1967, discussing the significant weather events that took place, particularly the very, very sad event at Aberfan. Right, okay, so we're actually going to do one more. I thought this would be a trilogy, but I think from here we've got to go on to 67, 68, haven't we? We did 68, 69 years ago, so that's already in the can, and so we won't do that again. But we haven't ever looked at, like, the winter of 67, 68, which was quite an interesting winter, and the summer of 1968 was quite interesting too. So... How does August Bank Holiday Monday sound for the fourth and final part of the Back to the 60s series? If you're up for it, then let me know in the comments and like the video, and we shall bring you the fourth and final part of the Back to the 60s series, covering the rest of 1967 and on into 1968 for the August Bank Holiday Monday, which will of course be the last last Monday of August. Yes, I know, but up in Scotland, Bank Holiday Monday in August is the first Monday. Right, okay, if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, subscribe. Thanks so much everyone for doing that. Thanks so much for spending this time with me and with GavsWeatherVids on your Bank Holiday Monday. And we shall end it there. Everything will be back to all on the channel tomorrow, by the way. UK weather forecast, European outlook, 10 to 14 day. It's all coming back tomorrow. But for this one, this historic video, part 3 of the Back to the 60s series, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Bank Holiday Monday. And bye for now.